Hello and welcome to the Psychic Stories podcast, encouraging conversations about mental health. Today I'm speaking to Chris Bundell. Chris supports people with effective strength and conditioning coaching and sleep habits so they can have long, successful sporting careers. Chris, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
Very well, thank you. So the goal of today, maybe slightly different from what we normally do. Normally we have an open, honest conversation about your mental health journey, but today Chris is going to speak about athletic performance and sleep and some of the mentoring work that he's involved in, because we think that actually getting objective perspective, especially from someone who has a huge amount of knowledge around performance and also sleep, would perhaps be very, very useful and interesting to some of our listeners, and that we hope that kind of discussing this will kind of share and kind of normalize, I think we were speaking before, popularize and enable you to speak in a very simple language about some of the tools and tips that might be able to help people kind of maybe sleep better, maybe perform better, because like we said before, there's a lot of things you can do which aren't necessarily complicated, but if you can get them right, it's good. Sound good to me?
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. So would love to hear more about you. Please, let us know what you do, what you're up to, why you do it. Go from there.
Yeah, so I'm a strength and conditioning coach by trade, which means I help people improve their performance physically, I suppose, but that carries over quite nicely into psychologically as well, because the two go hand in hand. I'm part of a private facility delivering strength conditioning to general population, but that includes sort of long-term rehab members all the way up to I'm privileged to work with some elite athletes as well. One in particular, I spend most of my time coaching, but I've had some privilege of working with some other athletes as well. And then I work for the university, helping younger S&C coaches to develop their practical skills in order to go out into the world and get a job as a strength and conditioning coach as well. And then my other side hustle is I consult on sleep. So I did some research on sleep in my earlier education days, and became a bit of a topic I got quite interested in. And I think you know when you like something because you end up as you don't just do the work you have to do. So I finished my research and then I continued reading and continued speaking about it, and it became quite a thing of mine that I realized that I could make a large difference with a large amount of people with quite minimal not minimal work, but I suppose small things were making big changes to people's lives, and I got a bit of a buzz for doing that. So I now also work as a sleep consultant. So I work one-on-one with a few people, helping to improve their sleep. But mostly most of my work is done with like sports teams or large groups of members of gyms, where I go in and I'll speak to them on a whole and try and, I suppose, educate them on sleep, but not necessarily the science of sleep. I will talk about that to help them understand, but mostly I'll try and give them some practical skills and some habits that they can create, and some simple things they can do on a day-to-day basis that's going to help their sleep in general. And that's quite rewarding, getting messages back saying, oh, that's made such a difference just doing this one thing. And it's taken them 20 seconds to implement, and down the line, they're gaining 2 hours of better sleep a night, and that's a hell of an investment, right?
And it's those things, it's that those kind of marginal changes have an enormous impact, and it's identifying what those changes are.
I mean, I always suggest that people start with the strategies that are going to have the least cost. And I don't mean from a money perspective, I mean from an effort perspective.
Yeah, good point.
If something's very easy to implement, because a lot of changes people need to make in their lives to better themselves require a lot of behavioral change or like habit changing. Now that's quite laborious to do. That takes a lot of effort, takes breaking some bad habits, building new ones. Whereas and sometimes, when you speak to people, you listen to what they're saying, and I'm like, it sounds to me like you know your own issue, and you probably just need to go buy a thinner duvet.
Yeah.
And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, why don't you try it? And they'll go do it, and they'll be like, oh my God, that was so much better with a thinner duvet. And I'm like, oh, you said you were hot, and I asked what tog your duvet was, and you got back to me a day later, and it was like a winter tog, and you've got it on in summer. So, that's an £8 change. No behavioural change, and something as simple as that. If that's going to make a difference to someone's sleep, then that's a no-brainer. So I always get them to start with stuff like that, as opposed to the stuff that. There's some stuff out there that will have a huge benefit as well. Things like trying to sleep in a pattern, like in a rhythm. So you're going to bed and sleep at the same, and waking up at the same time. But that's becomes quite hard because that has an effect on maybe your social life or your work life, or your partners. It might be not in line with your partner's habits. So that has a large cost. And even though it's worth doing, I'd suggest people start on the simple stuff first, like drinking less caffeine, for instance. Quite easy to do.
And I think as well, we were chatting before we started, like both of us are young dads or new to the dad game. And if there's one thing that, and I think when you were speaking on the Parity Festival, one of the things you were chatting about was, around the issues of sleep and parents as well. Like I've certainly found that to get, theoretically to get good sleep habits is great, but when the kid comes in the mix, everything gets thrown out the window. Like I'd love to hear, perhaps maybe for my personal gain, how as a dad have those kind of, how you educate people in terms of sleep habits, has that changed? Has it informed your view, and does it change it in a way, or does it just reinforce what you already knew and say, actually, this stuff really works?
I mean, it's not changed my outlook and the advice I give. So, and the advice and everything that I would give, not just from a sleep perspective, is, and I'm sure it's one you've probably heard on these podcasts before, but it's controlling the controllables. So the big thing for parents is there's a lot of stuff you can't control. You can't do anything about. You can't control what time the baby's going to wake up tomorrow. You can't control nappy changing. You can't control just these, whether you want a really good week's sleep, but your son gets a cold, so there's no sleeping going on whatsoever. You can't control things like that. So what I always try and say to new parents in particular is that it's to control the controllables, and that is, if you're only going to sleep for 3 or 4 hours a night, broken, you can't control that because of X. However, what you can do is you can, for instance, apply small habits that are going to affect the quality of that 3 or 4 hours. So say I'm going to be up from the hours of, say the only sleep I get is from 2 a.m. to 6 p.m, right? 6 p.m, that'd be good. So 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. If I'm only going to sleep for 4 hours, I want those 4 hours to be the best quality hours I can possible, rather than 4 hours that are broken, tossing and turning. So something as simple, and the biggest thing that I promote in terms of sleep is caffeine, is limiting caffeine intake. For me, it has the least cost on someone's effort, and it has probably the largest benefit as well from experience.
And just quickly, just on a caffeine perspective, like, because obviously, I mean, personally, I stopped drinking caffeine 2 or 3 years ago and noticed that had a big effect. But the caffeine culture throughout the world is enormous. Like, do you really see that caffeine of being an issue, not necessarily in sleep, but actually, if everyone cut out caffeine, fundamentally, my view is actually, I think the world would probably be, maybe a calmer, more productive place.
Yeah, maybe. So I think I've read somewhere that it's the most widely consumed psychoactive drug in the world, caffeine, which is common sense now, I suppose. I love caffeine. I'm a coffee snob. Love coffee. Like, I'm the type of guy that buys beans from all over the world. And like, I like them roasted by a guy that I know. I do like caffeine. So before we get out of that, I'm not against caffeine.
Okay.
However, I'm caffeine in the morning. So I will drink caffeine in the morning, and I will stop at lunchtime. Now, the reason caffeine is such an issue is because there's a few myths around it. So the first one being is that you become desensitized to caffeine. So the more you drink caffeine, the less it will affect your sleep. Now, the reason that's a belief is because the receptors in your brain that caffeine messes up with that influence your sleep. Well, there's 2 receptors. One will be, and caffeine messes them up basically. I'm trying to say this as simply as possible. But yes, you've got two receptors. One, the caffeine is responsible for giving you that that dopamine response, that buzzing from you've had that cup of, if you've given up caffeine for a couple of years, you had a coffee now, you'd be bouncing around.
Yeah.
And people like myself that drink coffee every day, we don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
And that is because you become desensitized to the effects of caffeine on that. However, the receptor that is responsible for your sleep and caffeine affecting your sleep does not become desensitized to caffeine. So no matter how much coffee and tea you drink or caffeine you drink, if you're consuming it in the evenings, it is having an impact on your sleep. And the other argument I get back from that usually is, well, I can drink a coffee before I go to bed and I sleep just fine.
Yeah.
Which is true. You probably can get to sleep. However, there is a very big difference between being asleep and best quality sleep. And having caffeine in your system before you go to sleep will lead to a reduction in sleep depth and sleep quality. Often it will cause wakenings. In the people I work with, hundreds of people I know that have given up caffeine before they were waking up at say 3 o'clock in the morning and struggling to get back to sleep, and get rid of the caffeine, and it's solved the issues. It solved a lot of the issues that they thought were coming from elsewhere, and realistically, it was the caffeine. And this brings me back quite well to the point we were on before, where if I'm only going to sleep between 2 and 6 p.m. because of an controllable thing, if I'm drinking caffeine at 10 o'clock, then the 4 hours I do get is going to be of a lower quality than if I hadn't been. So, like I said, my advice to new parents or anyone with anything outside of their control is, don't worry about that. Don't worry about the things you can't control. Instead, focus on the things you can control, and instead make the best scenario you can.
And I think from personal experience, and I'm sure you've got your perspective as well, like those first few months of broken sleep, which takes anyone by storm. You're up every hour and a half, whatever it is, with a newborn. My wife and I certainly noticed that massive difference about when you got a good quality block of sleep. And that block might have been 2 hours, it might have been 4 hours, it might have been 3 hours. But when you got that good quality block, it's amazing. You wake up for the next change or feed or whatever it's going to be, and you actually feel fresh. And I completely agree with you, like getting those basics and fundamentals right, and not necessarily on just sleep as well, the sleep habits as well, but there's a lot to go to say with diet. And I'm sure working yourself with members of the public, but also athletes as well, diet probably plays a big factor. Alcohol content, drinking water. It seems to me that there's this kind of baseline of physical things that you can do to actually get yourself in a really good space, not only to sleep better, but actually like mentally and feeling good.
Sure. It comes down to, I think I better add something in quickly, or I risk a headlock when my missus gets in, and that is, my missus has predominantly done all the night feeds. So if I didn't say this now, I feel like I'd be taking credit for something that I haven't done. So my missus has breastfed unbelievably the whole time, and she's done all the night feeds. Essentially, there's been a couple of nights when I've had to take him for a drive in the middle of the night, but predominantly I've got 6-7 hours most nights. I'm up quite early for work, so I'm probably up at 5 for work most days. So I think it was just a kind of an agreement that I need to be awake for work, whereas she can maybe be a little bit tired the next day, and there's not much I can do in the middle of that anyway, because he's not keen on taking a bottle, so she's done most of the work. So just want to put that out there now. But
also as well, from our perspective as well, but identical situation, our baby didn't take a bottle, and my wife did all the feeding, was breastfeeding. So,
big shout out to all the breastfeeding wives out there and mums out there.
Generally all the mums and wives, and us us guys who feel like we might be contributing for 50% to childcare, but the reality is that we kid ourselves. It's 50% and it's 10%, but that's okay. But I'm certainly trying my hardest. But I think in that situation, like for me, I was awake because you got the crib next to you, in not in solidarity, but in like I'm awake because I've woken up. And I do think that even now as well, it's important just to get those habits right. And I think, speaking about perhaps from a mum perspective, it might be good to, speak from a mum perspective as well. Like they're the ones who are suffering the hour and a half. Did you find from your wife's perspective, did she have good sleep habits, or was she able to get that quality sleep in the broken sleep she had? Did she have to adapt and change?
Okay. So Yeah, it's quite hard, right? So I give out a lot of sleep advice, and I work with people on sleep. However, the hardest people to coach are the people you're very close to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's a very long-term project working with someone you live with, trying to get them to improve their sleep. It's almost like they don't believe what you're saying. Now I know deep down my missus is fully on board with what I say. However, I feel like there's a certain stubbornness that, you know, doesn't want to sort of maybe buy into everything that I say because it's me. However, her sleep habits have improved. So like, you know, she has given up caffeine. That's something that I managed to sort of like put in. Again, just swap decaf tea bags in the kitchen, leave it for a month. They won't notice the difference.
Exactly.
And after a month, they'll be like, well, you've given up caffeine, you never realised. So that's a good one. But yeah, no, things like phones. My partner and I, we've got quite a different sleep schedule. I'm up very early. I like to be up early. I like to go to bed early, up early.
Yeah.
And she's the opposite. She likes to go to bed a little bit later, wake up a little bit later. And obviously, that's now been torn to shreds by a baby that likes to get up about 6 o'clock in the morning. So she is tired. You know, and I, you know, she genuinely deserves. Well, and any mum that does this deserves a medal, if I'm honest. I do. It's a good point though. Like, so we talked earlier about what parents can do, right? This is quite an important one. So, sometimes you've got to be a little bit selfish. So there was 2 options when we had the baby. I either slept in the bedroom with the baby and the missus, and got woken up every time the baby. Well, not all this. I'm a very good sleeper, believe it or not. So I don't always hear the baby crying anyway. Sometimes I'll just be like, oh, he was asleep all night. And she's like, you're having a laugh, like you've been up 8 times. And I'm like, oh, sorry. But yeah, I had the choice of either sleeping in the same room and having my sleep broken, despite me not being able to do anything, or I bought a sofa bed and I put it up in the other room and I slept in there. And as a result, like what it meant was actually when it was my turn to take over, so my day off, I'd be up at maybe on a you know, I might have them at 6 o'clock in the morning, say. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm fresh, ready to go, and I then had better time with my son. I was a better partner. I was more productive, so I was able to do washing, and I was cooking breakfast. You know, I do that stuff anyway, but like you know, I wasn't too tired to do it, because when you're tired, you just can't be bothered. So and it took me being selfish and saying, look, do you know what? I'm not going to be able to help out. All I'm going to be there is like tapping your back as you're doing it. So I might as well go and sleep in a different room. Get 7 hours sleep. And it's not ideal, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, I would love to have been in the same bed, and the sofa bed was not a comfy one. But luckily I sleep well anyway, so it wasn't an issue. But it took being selfish in order for one of us to get some sleep, and that actually enabled the other one to then get more sleep, because she would then get 4 or 5 hours in the morning if that was possible. So
exactly, and it's that kind of it's that teamwork and partnership and that balance which you do start to appreciate. You just reminded me of something that my you know, my wife and I used to do. Well, not used to do, but she used to do to me. Like, if I ever woke up, you know, at let's say 4 in the morning, I said, "Oh, baby's been asleep," like, and she's like, "No, he's been up 3 times." But there's that she says, she goes, in her darkest moment, she's feeding the baby whilst looking at me in pure anger,
plotting your murder,
plotting my ultimate demise in so many ways. And I assume similarly, you sleeping softly in a sofa bed, you know, sleeping very deeply, I assume it happens to all dads, but ultimately, like you said, in the long term, it's how actually, like, you get a little bit more sleep, you can be a bit more helpful, and also you can function, you know, like you said, if you need to go and work. Just coming back to that kind of more broader principle, like when we set up Sidekick originally, like, we're the first to admit we're not mental health professionals. We're people who suffered from poor mental health. Our experience was that actually getting some of these basics right in terms of diet, sleep, mindset, connection, relationships, etc. There was a very fundamental base level of things which actually you could tweak, marginal tweaks, get right, and see an enormous improvement in your overall mood. Now, that maybe it wasn't the case if you're going through a very specific mental health crisis, through maybe a specific major life transition or tragedy, whatever it is. But on the day-to-day basis, we'd certainly found that getting those basics right were key before you even started to do some of the more kind of, you know, funky activities that you could possibly do. Like, I'd be interested to hear your perspective, because obviously you're involved very much in the physical and the sleep, and I assume working with perhaps, also, elite athletes as well, you probably stray into their kind of mindset and mental health at the same time.
Sure. It comes down to, all of this comes down, right, for me, is down to a stress response. So everything in life creates a stress, and stress is good when it's a controlled amount. So take weightlifting, for instance. If I was to train an athlete, and I do 3 sets of an exercise, it creates a stress response that is yay high, and then the rest period is when you get a little bit worse from this stress response, and then your body adapts and it says, oh, there's a bit of stress there, let's become more resilient so we can resist that stress in the future. And that's how, and there's small stress and then a recovery and gets better, and your body always wants to be in that balance, that homeostasis, where every time there's an action, there's a reaction, and your body has to do that. Now, whether it's anything in life, for me, it comes down to managing the stress. So managing the response to the stress, essentially. So you've got a few ways to go about that. If you have a large amount of stress, you have a larger gap before your next amount of stress, and then you have time to recover from that, essentially. If you bombard yourself with large amounts of stress, your body goes downhill, essentially. At which point it's detrimental things start happening. So you can have large amounts of gaps between high amounts of stress. You can reduce the amount of stress that you have, so you can reduce the intensity of the stress. So if you have less high amounts of stress, then you have smaller recovery times, and you can do it more regularly. However, there's less of a positive adaptation from that due to this. Sometimes the stress level isn't sufficient to produce a positive adaptation, essentially. So you just become accustomed to something as opposed to actually making positive adaptation to it. Other option then is you improve your ability to recover. So if I had an athlete, say, and they had to take 3 days in between each time we created any stress, then essentially I can only do so much with that person. However, if I can improve their ability to recover in a shorter amount of time, I'm able to create greater amounts of stress, and they recover from them, essentially. So they're able to make these waves steeper and shorter whilst recovering and still making progress. And I suppose that's the goal, really. It's managing the stress you put on the person and making that stress efficient. So does that stress create the adaptation you want to achieve? Is the juice worth the squeeze? So the whole thing about being a good S&C coach and strength conditioning coach is, can I achieve the same thing with less of a stress on the body? So for instance, say I want to improve someone's maximum power output. If I do 10 sets of 10, but actually the only ones that were really powerful were the first 3 sets. After that, they were just fatigued. All I've done is create 7 sets of fatigue that I didn't need to. So become more efficient with what I'm doing. So I need to become efficient so that this stress is targeted. So it's exactly stressed to make the adaptations I want to achieve. Similarly, I want to improve their ability to recover in between sessions, so that I can create more of a stress more regularly. So I can create these more efficient and intense stresses regularly. And that's where the sleep comes in for me. You improve someone's sleep, this optimal recovery conditions when you're sleeping. So hormone production, the lack of movement, the cognitive recovery is all maximum. It's all optimal time for recovery. So sleep's largely important with that, but then also lifestyle as well. So say someone's training and sleeping really well, that might be great, but if they're also got a newborn at home, they've also got a business that's struggling in COVID, it all sounds quite familiar here, but they like
very real.
This is 3 things of high stress that actually I'm not able to make a positive response to. So I have to, there has to be some give somewhere. I can either improve my ability to recover in between, or I can reduce the intensity of the stress I'm putting on myself, or I can essentially make I can go downhill from a health and performance perspective, really. So it all comes back to a stress response and an adaptation event, essentially.
And that makes a huge amount of sense. And I think, like we talk about, often it's talked about this in terms of kind of physical exercises, like your physical stress response. And I know in perhaps my academic circles, not necessarily popular, maybe more popular now, that can be extended very easily into the mental sphere at the same time. And in fact, that the physical and mental actually are two sides of the same coin, but we have this very separate notion of them. And it does seem to me that and I'd be interested to hear your kind of experience working with people perhaps that maybe tried this, is like in that situation where you've got someone who's got, you're going to give them a physical stress response by doing their training, and their progress is going to go up on a physical basis. But then at the same time, they've got some stuff going on in their lives, something maybe, like a new child, business, or a tragedy, basically something that is nothing related to that training as well. It certainly seems to me, and from our experience at Sidekick, that actually the stress responses to, let's say, those events, you can exercise and you can build your resilience to that, and therefore improve that recovery and coping mechanism as part of that. And I'd be interested to see, like, have you worked with people who, let's say, have been training physically, also they've got a lot of stuff going on in their lives which is maybe relatively negative, but actually they've got some really strong ability to cope, and therefore actually their performance is almost as good as if they didn't have it? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it all comes down to coping strategies.
Yeah.
If people have positive coping strategies towards something, essentially they can handle a lot more stress than someone who can't. Unfortunately, some people, not some people, a lot of people have negative coping strategies. So say someone's coping strategy is to eat junk food.
Yeah.
Then that is not having a positive effect on their ability to recover. It may be providing some sort of relief mentally, but it's not having a positive, because actually it creates more stress, because they feel worse because they're eating junk food. They become more tired because they're eating like a less nutrient dense diet. Maybe their confidence goes down the window because they gain some weight. And essentially, like, that's having a positive respect. Whereas if someone's coping strategy is to spend 7 minutes, 8 minutes meditating, actually what that's done is it's lowered the cortisol response. It's helped them tap back into that parasympathetic nervous system where optimal recovery happens, and actually they can positively adapt to stress still because their coping strategies are so good. I genuinely believe coping strategies is the big factor between those that succeed in stressful situations and those that don't. So a lot of it comes down to perception of stress. Like, some people perceive things unnecessarily as highly stressful when they don't need to be as well. So the perception of it, but a lot of it's going to come down to coping strategies. And like I said, I do try and believe that people need to have positive coping strategies. So a lot of people use exercise as a coping strategy.
Yeah,
so
and that comes up a lot on these episodes. A lot.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. I train for my mental health. And that's great. If training for your mental health is good. However, I think a lot of the time people look at the short term and not the long term. So, for instance, people, when they train for their mental health, they tend to like a bit of a pasting. They want to go to the gym and they want to be thrown from pillar to post.
Exhausted.
And they want to crawl out the gym.
Yeah,
exactly. And that, however, creates an additional recovery demand. So they were struggling to cope with stress, and their coping mechanism was to do something that requires a large amount of stress recovery.
Good point.
So actually, it's not helping. Whereas for instance, say you were to do, say you were to improve your aerobic capacity, right? So low intensity, very low aerobic zone conditioning, right? That will improve your aerobic capacity. That you'll improve your resting heart rate. You'll get a better HRV score, and all these things are going to put you in a better place to recover. Now, I'm not saying you should just go out and run like Forrest Gump. It could improve your aerobic conditioning. I'm saying that, if you were to maybe do some lower intensity work instead of the high intensity work, then you would essentially have a better recovery response. Similarly, actually, when you work with an athlete and you're trying to reduce the recovery demands, most of the time you keep the intensity, but you reduce the volume. So for instance, say I was to, so I do this quite regularly. So I will test readiness of an athlete when they come into the gym. I will get them to perform a jump, because jumps are the first thing that will be so high power output. So what will be first detectable for any signs of fatigue. So I'll have them jump, and I'll measure their jump height using a machine. And if it's below 20% of their average jump height, then it's showing signs of residual fatigue. And when that happens, the session I'll perform will keep the intensity. So say I plan to do, say we were on a max strength day. They would still do the max strength work. However, the volume of the max strength work they were doing would be reduced.
So actually, it's about adapting your program.
Yeah, it's about adapting, and if when you're fatigued and stuff, and you come in the gym, and you're going to go train, and you think when you're stressed, if anything, like it should be adapted positively, not made to be right at pasting because I'm stressed. So I need to just go in the gym and I need to go punch a punch bag for 2 hours and do burpees till my eyeballs fall out. Like that's, it's creating another response, and I feel that's actually quite a negative coping strategy. That I see quite a lot, and actually it doesn't add anything positive to the equation. And actually, as a result, because they then do that, because they're now in this position where they can't recover, they actually make less positive adaptations to exercise. So because now they're no longer, they're struggling to achieve their long-term goal, because they've sacrificed their long-term goal for short-term goal of getting a pasting. Actually, what happens is they don't see results, and as a result of that, as a result of not seeing results, they then become even more stressed because they're getting unhappy from the lack of results. And it's this, a lot of the time it's a perpetual cycle.
How do you then, because I'm very open as a person to new ideas, and hearing you say this makes a lot of sense. And I can think, okay, I can see how that works, and therefore in my kind of in my mental health, in my physical health, I can adapt that. A lot of people are very stubborn and obviously think they know best about themselves, which they technically do. They do know best about themselves. How do you persuade someone to not go in and do a 2-hour pasting, and it's coming in and doing what you believe as a specialist? Is it about trust, that trusting you? How do you change their mind? Do you prove to them that their approach isn't working, or is it a more of a logical argument that you just gave me?
And from an athlete perspective, it's quite easy. I can show data. Athletes tend to like data. So I've got graphs of readiness data from athletes. I've got data I can show them that said, like, when you're underperforming because you've got some sort of residual central nervous system fatigue, I can show them the data that shows how they perform on those days, and why they need to and why they need to, and why we reduce the session. I explain the rationale behind it.
So that's their personal performance data.
So if I'm working with an athlete on that, it's quite easy in that sense. And if you go to any like elite sports club, they'll be tracking this on a regular basis.
Right.
With general population, there's a few ways you can go about it. There are some ways of tracking data. So there's a few like measures you can track over time that are worth tracking in someone that's really taking training seriously. So resting heart rate is a good one. If you're seeing negative trends in resting heart rate, it's a sign that what you're doing isn't working. If you're seeing negative trends in your heart rate variability, which is the irregularity between heartbeats, that's another data score you can be given. There's a few bits of tech out there these days that sort of have algorithms that work this stuff out. So one that's quite big at the minute, it's called Whoop. It's called a Whoop band.
Okay.
It measures like your I think I can't remember what it calls it now. It's been a while since I wore it. I can't remember. They have like a stress score for the day.
Okay.
Strain. You have a strain score.
Okay.
They call it your strain score. So and then it tracks your resting heart rate and your heart rate variability, and then based off that score, it will let you know how your data is trending, and it will say, for instance, you wake up in the morning, you'll check your Whoop score, and it will say like, oh, your sleep was poor, your HRV is trending negatively, you should probably take it easy when you go to the gym today. a lot of the time people stop wearing it because they don't like to be told that what they're doing isn't working.
Yes.
But but for someone that's serious about making goals, sometimes you have to look at the long term. So that's quite easy with data, where you can provide science, objective data to show that what they're not doing that's working. From a subjective background, I mean, I'm quite lucky that I tend to work with mostly people that are quite largely invested in their health and performance, because my time doesn't come cheap. So people tend to invest quite heavily in what I'm doing. So people tend to buy into what I'm saying. They might need reminding on occasion. And then I think, and in those situations, I think it comes down to a few things. So like most communication skills, it's going to come down to some sort of level of empathy, some sort of level of understanding, and then effective communication to try and address. So something called motivational interviewing that I'm quite into. I did a course a while back on sort of trying to promote behavioral change through motivational interviewing. And that is trying to get the person to, basically the gist of it is, you're doing talking, listening, providing reflection on what this person's saying in order to get them to come up with the solution that you probably know is right for them. So, I might say to someone like, so say you were tired and you're coming in the gym, and I know for a fact, like you look tired. You've told me that you've had a rough day at work. You told me you've not slept for 2 weeks. You've been on a stag do for 4 days before that. Your nutrition's been optimal. You've been through McDonald's drive-through so many times that they know your order off by heart. And I know that you're not in a good place for a thrashing. So I know today we need to be reducing the volumes. So I've got a few tactics for that. I would say, your week's not been good. Like, how do you think that affects you, for instance? And you might then say out loud that, actually it makes you feel pretty tired. And I say, do you think another packed thing's going to provide a positive response to that? What is it you're looking to get out of the gym? I'm looking to get a bit healthier. Why do you want to get healthier? Because I want to feel better. Okay, well, do you think doing another pace thing today is going to make you feel better? Is that what you're saying to me? And they quite quickly realize that actually what the person I'm speaking to is their short-term compulsive decision maker, as opposed to their long-term rational thinker. And actually I'm trying to tap into to that person. I'm trying to bring that person back to the surface, that actually I remind them of their long-term goals. I'll remind them of their of what they've employed me to do. And aside from that, I'll just talk loads so that they can't work too much. So in their rest period, I'll start a conversation that I know they're interested in.
And they won't even realize.
No, sometimes, we talked about Lauren earlier. That's she'll readily admit I do this all the time with her. She's an endurance athlete, so she very much comes from a no pain, no gain background. So, and I'm very much the opposite. I'm do something very intense, take a long break period, and do something very intense, long break. So we meet in the middle, and I essentially sometimes I'm saying, you need to take some rest period. And if I know she's not against it, I'll start a conversation. She loves hearing about Albert, my baby boy. We both like to cook, so we'll talk about cooking. We'll talk about her training week and stuff. And sometimes I can get her to take 3.5 minutes rest, which she is really against, just by having a conversation. And this comes down to like just experience in the coaching game of trying to get the best things out there. But linking back to Laura, and she's really got on board with the data I use to provide the readiness scores as well. So she's usually quite good from that sense. And again, from a coaching perspective as well, a lot of it comes down to trust. So rapport in that actually I am the person that is responsible for getting you where you need to be. And in order to do that, there comes from a mutual level of trust. One, that you're going to do the work that I say, but also they got to believe that the work I get them to do is going to be what they need. And I feel that takes time, a lot of people. So sometimes you have to provide them a little bit of what they want in order to get them to do what they need. So coaching experience again.
But do you find as well that, because I know just from a very amateur perspective, especially when used to go to the gym years ago, go powerlifting, whatever it was, like that obsessive stage that most 16-year-old boys seem to go through, like it was almost like there was a lot of reframing required. And I frankly could have done with someone I used, or like a mate standing next to me, just going, Matt, X, Y, and Z in your past would lead to the conclusion that today might not be the best day to achieve X weights on whatever you're going to do. And because frankly, back then when I was young, my mood was dictated by how much I lifted. And I know for young people, and actually, do you know what? I've got mates who I'm 35 now. I've got mates who are 35 who still go that. If they don't go in and they don't bench or deadlift or squat or clean or jerk, whatever it is, a certain weight, that changes their mood. It does require someone like yourself to reframe that conversation. And it's not the conversation, it's you're reframing from an external perspective to try and reframe their internal perspective for them to go, oh yeah, actually, that's a really good point. But saying that, you still leave feeling like a failure. And it's kind of, it's still, there's an element of lose-lose. And I think we mentioned Lauren, and for those listening, Lauren and Tammy have started a mental health brand called Sizu back last year. We co-created the Parity Festival with them on that explicit recognition that the mental health and the physical health should be equal. They should be at parity. They should be equal. And I'd be interested to understand, like, from your perspective, like, that jump test you said earlier, when you come in and let's say they're 20% under, is that a physical test or is that a physical and mental test? And actually, are you in some situations where you're saying, okay, you are fatigued, but you're not physically fatigued. You're almost like motivationally fatigued. And therefore, what I'm advising is some level of these coping strategies. Maybe, I don't know what it is, meditation, breathing, or CBT. It doesn't matter what it is, but work on that. And then that will improve that, your level of adaptability and recovery of that stress response. And you'll be able to come in here fresher and, fresher more often. And I assume that might play more from an elite perspective as well, because from chats with Lauren and talking about a lot of her training, and it's an enormous mental game, especially for endurance at the same time. And how do you navigate that? Because it's very complicated. Sometimes needs a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at most elite athletes these days, they do have like mental support. And rightly so, because at the end of the day, sometimes you're chasing marginal gains between silvers and gold medals, and that can be the difference. So a few points you brought up there. I never just use objective data. So before we do those objective tests, during the warm up, I will always talk to the person and say, like, how's your week been? What's going on? How are you feeling today? Has your week been good? I talked about basic things, and I'll be making a subjective assessment in my head as to where they're subjectively in regards to today's session.
Yeah.
I will then combine that with the objective data before making a coaching decision based on the work that I'm going to do. I won't go miles off the plan. I will just adapt the plan in order to suit what's going to be best for that person today, which is, a combination of the two. And again, it comes from coaching experience. That does on a general perspective, you can, from a general population perspective, you can usually go off something called like rate of perceived exertion. So you might say like, or reps in reserve is another way. And say like you're going to do, people go in the gym and say, I'm going to back squat 200 kilo. Oh, that's quite heavy. 145 kilo today, five reps. But actually, when they've put 140 kilos on, they've done 4 reps with it, and they can't get any more out. At which point, that is like a 10 out of 10 on rate of perceived exertion. They've exerted themselves to a 10 out of 10, and there's no reps in reserve, which would be that's a maximum. And actually, what we encourage people to do from a general population perspective is to train at like an RPE 9 for their like most intense exercises. So not for every exercise, but say the main thing they're going to do that day is a trap bar deadlift, for instance. They have to do that at an RPE 8.5 to 9 and leave a couple of reps in the tank, because actually training maximally should be a rarity. It should not be every single session. Should be a lot less than most people do currently train maximally. So you could do that with general population. I've had another point that you asked about that I was going to bring up. And then we're talking about like what you said about the mental support. So it's a minefield, isn't it? Essentially, of you try and wear many hats, and I think like we don't have all the answers. Like, I don't know all the coaching answers at all. Like a lot of the time, I'm just trying to do. I'm just trying not to do the worst job. Is the best thing you can do. Is, you know, I'm just trying. Like when I see things, I coach in front of me. Like if I can refrain positively, if I can, the way I say things can frame things positively as opposed to negatively. You know, if I'm praising, say for instance, I work with someone. This is a good example. If I work with someone and they went max out, and I was like, yes, great effort, really good. And then the next week they came in and they trained to an RPE 9 because they were a little bit tired, and I was like, yeah, nice work. Guess which one they're going to want to do to impress me? They're going to try and crave the one where I praise them loads for giving maximum effort. So, you know, maybe coaches are creating their own issues by praising this hard work all the time. You know, this not hard work, but praising, you know, the wrong type of work. And the other point I was going to say as well was, this is what happens when I think of many points at once.
To be honest, you have memorized these points. It's quite staggering how you're still going, you know, in terms of memorizing what I've said. So keep going, please do.
There was one more that I was going to say, and it's alleviated me. I've just got to grab my laptop charger.
That's all right.
I like a MacBook, but they don't run out of battery quickly, do they?
No, that's all right. And with any pauses, we can edit that out. That's no problem at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
I can't remember what the last point was. Sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, I'm actually staggered that you could remember all of those, because I was thinking, God, I can't even remember what I was saying. I babble on. But with, I think, yeah, a couple of things that thrown up, this ideas of this maximal training, like it seems to me, and I'm like, I certainly from my own perspective, like I was previously obsessed with physical exercise, obsessed. And that disappeared because I realized I was doing that for negative things. And now, you know, I exercise moderately, but nothing like what I used to think about, not what I used to do, what I used to think about. There seems to be like an obsession, a cult around the levels of intensity that are required. And it seems like, you know, people, you know, like yourself and your clients, you know, from an elite perspective, maybe Lauren, are extremely lucky to have you, because you can channel that knowledge in there. But people who are going on the everyday basis are maybe going, and I always bring it up in terms of CrossFit or these kind of high, very, very high level, like, it just seems to me that like it's like people are going almost, I'm not sure if everyone to say people are going for the wrong reasons, but they seem to be doing things which I would have considered previously dangerous, and I was completely obsessed. Do you get a sense that the public, i.e. the people who are not athletes, that athletic world, are going off? It seems like they're going off on a tangent, and it doesn't seem to be a healthy tangent. That's my own personal view. What's your view on it?
Yeah, I completely agree. So a lot of the time people are seeing how elite people train through social media and thinking that's how they train all the time. So people will see, like, people, you know, I'm not particularly into CrossFit. I like some aspects of it, but I feel the training philosophy is somewhat marred, particularly in the, before you get to elite. I feel it's not optimal for the general population that are doing it. That's a different story. But you take the elite level CrossFitters, they are not doing CrossFit every single day. Like elite level CrossFitters are not going to the gym and wadding on a daily basis. Elite athletes are not fragging themselves on a daily basis to get better. They are doing the bare minimal they need to do to make positive adaptation. And this is it. However, that is not interesting. It is not interesting to see Lauren doing soft tissue work for an hour in the evening. They don't see that. However, the hour of soft tissue allows her to push a little bit harder on the next session. But people see them pushing harder and think that's the key. I can tell you now, the difference between elite athletes and non-elite athletes is the elite athletes are better at doing the basic things they need to do to get better. Not better at doing the intense work, they are better at doing the basics. And this is the large issue, is people are largely missing out the foundational skills to be functionally optimal. They are missing out on the basics, 100%. And I think a lot of it comes down to the environment. So if you go into a CrossFit gym and everyone is going max effort, guess what you're going to do within a week? You're going to go max effort on absolutely everything. If you go somewhere where like yoga is done, you know, if you move in to a house share and 4 people in the house are doing yoga daily, probably going to start doing yoga on a daily basis. So a lot of it is going to come down to the environment you're in. And unless you're exposed to a proper training environment that's optimal for you, you know, you might not discover it on your own. Like, very few people are training effectively, in my opinion, on their own. Don't get me wrong, move well, move often. And the big thing for me, right, is there's no problem with training intensely. It is the volume at which people train intensely, which is the issue. So, you know, you can go in the gym and lift a max effort weight. That is no problems. What you cannot do is go to the gym every single day of the week and lift a maximal effort weight every single time. That is the issue. You can go flat out on you've seen an assault bike, worst thing. Devil's tricycle, like can't you know, they bring the pain quite quickly. You cannot go flat out on an assault bike every single day and make positive adaptations realistically long term. You know, it's a balanced approach to training. You need large volumes of submaximal work. From a cardio perspective, that's like sort of like zone 1 and 2 aerobic. That is like, you know, low threshold stuff. From a weightlifting perspective, it's technical work, it's foundational movements, it's mobility, it's stability, it's correct breathing. It's all that. However, that stuff is longer, and it's the stuff that gets skipped, and that's the stuff you can do lots of. But people are doing short amounts of that and large volumes of high intensity work, and that's largely where people are getting it wrong.
And do you think that, like, and maybe this is a contentious question, do you think that people who are, you know, high performing in terms of, you know, elite athletes, do they have a, you know, a responsibility to others who are at the, you know, relative bottom of the pyramid, who are just wanting to keep fit but are getting caught up in some pretty, you know, like, you know, maybe obsessive ways of training and the wrong ways of training? Like, is the duty on the individual, like, and you know, this is a more philosophical point, the duty on the individual to find the right information? But like you said, like, no one goes out intentionally to do something wrong. They think they're doing what is right based on the information they have. Like, how do we educate the general public to say, well, actually, you know, like, from my perspective, like, I watch, you know, something like, you know, the high intensity stuff and think, wow, I mean, that looks pretty intense. Like, there's no way that could be, you know, that looks safe or effective. Like, but how does everyone come to that conclusion? And, you know, does it require, like, so everyone to have a coach like they do, you know, like they do, maybe have a, you know, an executive coach in terms of for your mental side?
Right, I'm going to try my best to remember all these points, but I had a brainstorm then while stuff was going on. But so the first one is, I don't think elite athletes are giving these wrong messages out. You know, the elite athletes I follow, and I'm talking the truly elite. I'm talking about your Olympians and people succeeding in high level sports where there's a large field of people competing. They're not sending these messages out. You look at their Instagrams; they're not putting pictures of them fragging themselves around the gym. A lot of the problem is coming from sub-elite athletes.
I see.
That are sub-elite because of the way they train. So particularly people, social media influencer types, putting nonsense on that actually they haven't got a clue. You know, they might be in good shape. A lot of the time, people that are in good shape, it's genetics. I know people that have eaten Cocoa Pops for breakfast and lunch, and still had a much better body than I have. You know, and you know, and they're putting these on this, and I'm doing all this. This is what I'm doing, this HIIT workout, and you know, they've not got in shape a lot of the time by doing these HIIT workouts. They've got in shape by following the basics, and they've got a good foundation of skill, and they move okay. You know, they've learnt the movements first, or they had them already. They never lost them. And then they might be doing these HIIT workouts for a little bit to video them and put them on Instagram. But you know, I hate clicking the search button on Instagram because the amount of nonsense that comes up that just starts to annoy me. So one of the things I do for my mental health is I just don't go on there because it just winds me up. So why would I? Again, it comes down to cleaning up your environment. Again, so you look at the environment with social media. If you follow people doing these HIIT workouts, guess what workouts you're going to do? However, if you follow someone, you know, not to my own horn, but you follow someone like myself or the other coaches I work with, we put out solid information around recovery, solid information around effective training. I don't just put on the ones where I'm going max out on stuff. if I do put those on, they're always the ones that get the most engagement, surprise, surprise. But, and that comes back to the environment as well. Now, how do we address this? Maybe people do need a coach. I think if I need help with something, the things I've done the most successful in life, I've got help with. My university work, I had a great mentor, Gemma, who took me through uni. I honestly, if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have been as good at what I was doing, because I had someone to ask questions to. She guided me in the right direction. She had made the same mistakes I had made previously, and knew how to get me through it. And it's the same with a coach. If you really want to take your health and fitness seriously, get someone that takes health and fitness seriously. Six pack Pete on Instagram, he's in it for the likes. It's completely different. And again, and also this, now it comes down to the industry. So we're getting a bit of my high horse here, but there's people out there with no qualifications that think max effort boot camps are the way to produce results. And people like, my mum, for example, might book on one of these things and goes and gets an absolute pasting at this boot camp, and that's just poor coaching at the end of the day. And there are poor coaches out there, unfortunately. I don't like to say it because I don't like to rib on the industry I'm in, but there are some issues with what's out there. It's not it's not heavily regulated enough, and where it is regulated, it isn't good enough. People aren't educated highly enough. They don't have the experience. I think if you're really going to take it seriously, you need to look for someone that is appropriately qualified. So I'm talking at the highest level, you're talking about strength and conditioning accreditations. You're talking about degrees with experience, not just degrees on their own, degrees with experience, or even like personal development. So, have they gone and trained with people that are very good? So there's a lot of people out there ignoring the formal qualification side. And I know a few of them that have gone and learnt with amazing people and done things like that, but that's not recognized. I couldn't even get a job in I wouldn't be able to get a job in your standard gym, like a gym that hires 16-year-olds straight out of college, because it's a level 3 personal training course. I've not even got one. I own a business that delivers level 3 personal training qualifications, but that is purely because I want to upskill the training these people are having. But I've gone on a right tangent here, but the level, I couldn't get a job in fitness first. I don't even think that's around anymore, is it? I couldn't get a job in your standard gym because I don't have the industry required level 3 qualification. But I've got strength conditioning certification, I've got degree level education, I've got a decade of experience, but that doesn't count for anything because I haven't passed the tick box test that you've got to pay money for, which I just point blank refuse to do. It's that. And the last one as well was just the last point before I forget was where does the responsibility lie? At the end of the day, the only person that has got your best interests at heart is you. So I think the question comes back down to is what you are doing taking you closer to what you want to achieve, or is it not? So have you been training your own way for? I don't even train myself. I get coaching because I know that I cherry pick. I do the stuff I like to do and not the stuff I don't want to do. So, and sometimes is the responsibility with you? The responsibility ultimately falls down to you. So, is it the influencer's fault? No, he didn't force you to go do 10 of these workouts. There's information out there that tells you proper training. So maybe do that. Your body, for instance, it tells you when things aren't going right, and that's pain. But people still plow on through pain, don't they? So, who has the ultimate responsibility for it? Don't get me wrong, we can all do better as coaches. Everyone can do better. I've made mistakes in the past. We could all do better. However, it ultimately comes down to the responsibility does fall down to the person. And that's actually why I like health and fitness so much, is because you can't cheat it. It ultimately comes down, and I can provide you the tools and maybe give you the quickest way to get there. However, it ultimately comes down to the individual to do it. And I think that's why it's such a level playing field, that actually anyone in good shape, I always have respect for, or anyone that looks after the health and fitness, I always have respect for, because that doesn't necessarily, it's not given to anybody. That
No.
it might be slightly easier for some, but it's something they've had to work towards.
And I think you raised a fundamental point about that, like that prioritizing. It's down to you. Like you've got to make the decision. You've got to own it at the same time. And I think, you know, in running the parallels, like when we first started Sidekick, like the whole kind of motto, tagline around Sidekick was helping you help yourself. This isn't about going on to something. Yeah, and it's not going on to something and just to go, okay, this is what I'll do and look at it blindly. You've got to look at something at a trusted source of information like yourself, like you, degrees, experience, accreditations. But that doesn't matter if you're not turning up with that whole mindset and philosophy of like, everything I'm doing is my doing. I'm not, you know, and I suppose it's getting rid of that blame and victim culture as well. It's like, I'm accountable for everything I do. It's very, very powerful. And I think you raised a very good point. But at the same time, when people are overloaded with information and they don't know who to trust, you know, I think, you know, ultimately first what you want to ask yourself is, okay, I'm interested in, you know, I'll say for the example for you, Chris, in physical performance. Okay, where am I going to get my information from? And actually do a little bit of research. You know, if you're going to look at some influencers or some ones with little blue ticks, you know, what are they about? Look at their website, look at their accreditation, and find and follow the people that you actually do, because things like Instagram, Facebook, they can be really, really helpful because there's a lot of information out there, but you've got to cut out the crap. But like you said, it's your responsibility. And if you're not performing well enough, if you're not sleeping well enough, it's down to you to change. And I've certainly found, and, you know, like ourselves in the psychic community, you know, we're run by 10 volunteers who are supposedly trying to help people help themselves in terms of mental health. Do we help ourselves every day? Probably not. Not at all. Like, I mean, I could list 5 things that I should have done today to support my own mental health that I haven't done. And if you ask me why I haven't do them, I can make up some excuse. But the truth is, I can't be bothered. And therefore, I've got to be accountable for the fact that I feel a bit lower than I do usually. You've got to be accountable for yourself.
I love have you read Atomic Habits by James Clear?
Yeah, it's one of our recent posts was kind of not promoting it, but kind of saying that this is a really good book that you should read.
Oh, hands down, one of the best books I've ever read. Changed my life. You know, combine that with I like Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, which is like a productivity book. Along the similar lines, habit forming. There's a quote in that book. I don't know, it's a quote. It's been so long since I read it, but there's like a chapter that says about stating what you are doing and why you are doing it, and it makes you sound so stupid. So Absolutely. It's like you go to the cupboard and I'm having this chocolate bar now because I want it, regardless that my goal is to lose body fat. I'm going to eat this chocolate bar
because I'm sad.
Because I am sad. I'm eating chocolate, and I love that. And you just said then about being accountable to yourself. I really like that. And I like that with people as well, is saying like, you try and get like, from a coaching perspective, you get someone like, why are you squatting? But before you get in the gym, I want you to explain why you're going to train maximally. So I'm training maximally today because even though I've been advised not to, but my coach, I'm going to ignore the advice I packed for, and I'm just going to go max out anyway.
And it sounds funny, doesn't it? It sounds humorous when you say it.
Yeah. You literally, like, I laughed out loud when I read that bit in the book. I thought, oh, that's so good. Like, I'm going to go on my phone in bed, even though I'm so tired. I'm going to moan about being tired all day. Like, it sounds really joking. I sound like I'm taking the mickey here, but like, if you can say that to yourself in your head, and it almost like brings you back into perspective and go, actually, I like that. And you said about keeping yourself personal there, like, I really like that one for keeping myself in check.
But also, like, and the reason I'm laughing is because it's true. And ultimately, and there's a philosophy of comedy, and often it is because you are saying the truth, even though what resonates with me is completely, the different. And the comedy comes out is because there's a complete disconnect, and that's why I laugh. And in that situation, I completely agree with you. If you can articulate why you're doing something, and that could be a menial task, going to the cupboard to get some food, or it could be going to a workout, or it could be I'm going to have a kid. If you can articulate why you're doing it, I do believe that you'll cut out half of the crap decisions in your life because you actually think about it, and you'll come up with you actually, even if you're doing something you don't want to do, at least it has a reason behind it. And therefore, like, I've got a job. I've got a job. I don't like it, but it provides for my family and I love my family. Okay, that's fine. That's okay. You don't need to change the job. Like, but everything's aligned. But that why, I think, is fundamentally important. But I think, just before we close as well, because God, Chris, I could talk to you all day. Is interested. You mentioned earlier about your kind of social media habits. You say actually it's not good for mental health. What are the tools and tips that have helped you along your way in terms of what do you do to help?
I've actually done something recently that's been really productive, and that is I got rid of the social media off my phone.
Yeah.
And I put it on my iPad.
Okay.
Because I don't carry my iPad around constantly. I'm such a busy guy with, like, I do get a lot done, and one of the things I've really found helped was I've originally set I'm sorry, one of my dogs has just been sick in the living room.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, just classic dog thing. Probably going to eat it up in a minute anyway. Yeah, so I've done a few things like for social media. I've applied screen time, like screen time limits on the phone. Because social media ultimately probably does lead to some anxiety, some heightened anxiety. I don't see the positive aspect of it. And if I'm perfectly honest, I probably wouldn't be on there if not for keeping up with old military friends and keeping in contact with family in lockdown, and the fact that I've got some business through it. I do spend too much time on there. And one of the things I did was I actually got rid of the apps off my phone and put them onto my iPad.
Yeah.
And actually now I've allocated time, because I was finding I was actually sacrificing time with my son to go on my phone. And you say that out loud now, I sound like a horrible human being.
100%.
Like, so
100%.
I'm going to sacrifice time with my newborn to see what someone that I met 3 years ago had for lunch. Like, not a chance. Yeah. So I got rid of them, and now I only go on it for an hour at night, an hour and a half at night. Sometimes I will break my habit and go on it during the day if I'm trying to upload stuff or things like that. But that's been quite good from a social media perspective. I've also cleaned up my followers list. As soon as someone posts something that annoys me or is negative, I remove them from my followers list. Anything that doesn't bring positivity or education or at least a cute picture of a dog, like, I'll get rid of them off my off my following list.
And more broadly, outside of the social media stuff, like to keep yourself ticking over, what kind of stuff do you do?
So I exercise appropriately. So that doesn't add to, I don't have a massive recovery demand. I've particularly changed that since I've had the newborn as well. So I keep myself healthy. So I follow positive sleep habits and exercise habits, lifestyle habits, which obviously means that you're always going to be somewhat in a decent mindset. One thing I do, and one thing I swear by, is I'm a list maker. So I often, with people that know me, will obviously they obviously know me, you don't know me well, but they probably praise my productivity. I'm very much a go-getter. I've done both degrees, a long time full-time work, and house renovations and newborn. I've managed to get all that done. So I manage my time very effectively. I've been on a few courses, read some books and things, and the productivity is massive. And I'm very much a list maker. So before I go to bed the night before, so at the start of the week, I'll list all my jobs for that week, which can get added to throughout the week. And before I go to bed each night, I plan what I'm going to do the next day, because I find I'm most productive in the morning. So if I plan what I'm going to do in the morning when I wake up, I tend to get those jobs done soon without faff. Whereas if I don't plan the night before, I wake up in the morning, scroll through Instagram, have a half-hour long number two, cup of coffee, big breakfast, and then I've not really done anything. And then I'm not thinking. I do like to get up early, so I'm very productive early mornings. I find that helps, but I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have positive sleep habits, because I would be tired when I got up in the morning.
It's all interdependent, isn't it? Everything's all linked.
Yeah, everything all links essentially. Yeah, I would say the main thing I struggle with, my missus will back me up this, is I struggle when I'm not being productive. So, if I spend all weekend and for whatever reason I can't do something, I'm being tied up, she'll see it in me. I start to get snappy. I even if it's just go outside and cut the grass, like, I've got to do something ticked off my to-do list, which I suppose isn't good. I do get a bit antsy if I'm not pushing towards my goals, and I hate to stagnate, which maybe is why I've been quite successful in a few areas. But at the same time, maybe not so much. The other thing I do is I like to eat pizza. So got a pizza oven last year.
Okay.
If times get really bad, you fire that up, put a pizza in. How bad can life really be, right?
Do you know what? 100%. And that is literally like, no matter how bad life gets, and life will have to get extremely bad for you not to be able to have that pizza. And like, how much does a pizza cost to make? 70p?
Yeah, not much at all.
But I assume with your barista coffee habits, you might go for some really nice ingredients at the same time. Some artichokes and goat cheese.
Yeah, when you said 70p, I barely get my smart. I think that the posh tomatoes I use probably cost more than that. Yeah, no, I am. I'm a bit of a snob. Like, I don't.
Yeah, but no, but at the same, but you say snob, but actually, what I hear is actually no. I'm very clear with what I like. I know what I like, and therefore I'm going to do that. And actually, like you said, like if at the end of the day, when life does get so bad, and let's say you are all alone, a mate of mine was like, go eat some chocolate cake if you like chocolate cake. Like, chocolate cake doesn't talk back. Pizza doesn't talk back.
However, eat good quality chocolate cake. This is my advice. Like, if you go eat low quality chocolate cake, you'll eat the whole lot. If you go buy the richest chocolate cake that costs £4 a slice, you're only going to eat one slice, and it's only going to be so bad. Whereas you go to the supermarket and buy like a big cheap chocolate cake, you do the whole lot. So yeah. Life's too short not to eat high quality food.
I completely agree with you. Oh, Chris, honestly, thank you so much thank you so much for your time.
Sorry, quickly, just before I shoot, you asked how people could, being a bit of a minefield is where to get advice from training.
Yeah.
Ask. Honestly, the amount of people that don't ask is unbelievable. Like, if someone messaged me and said, look, I listened to your podcast and I want someone to train, I haven't got, they might be in a different place. However, I probably know someone in that area that I could refer someone to. Like, if you know someone that knows what they're doing, even if they're not willing to help out, and not someone that's in good shape, that doesn't necessarily mean they know what they're doing, but someone that is producing good results that you want to replicate in yourself, either ask them and take their advice, or ask if they know someone else that could point them in the right direction. I don't think I've ever not responded to a message I've been sent. In fact, if anything, everyone likes to feel valued. So, if someone messages me and says, "Oh, I really liked your advice. If you're anyone you could send me to," like, I've got a bank of coaches that I could send someone out to that could definitely keep someone in check, or just to follow on social media and get some information from. I think asking with anything, asking for help, asking for another slice of pizza, like, you don't have to.
If you want it
on your own all the time.
If you want it, ask, because if you don't ask, I mean, it's very simple. You're literally not going to get. And I certainly agree with you. Like, if you do ask, then what's the worst going to happen? Someone either doesn't reply or says no. That's not a bad outcome.
Yeah, I'm actually one of those people that it's funny you should say that. Like, I'll go in and I'll be like, what have I got to do for you to give me a pay rise? Like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Like, or I'll be like, like, how do I get your job? Because like, you're not going to be here forever. So how do I get your job? How did you get your job? Who do I need to speak to get your job? That's how I got the job at the uni. Basically, was like, I just sort of went in and was like, I'll do that. I'll do that. And I did it, and now, like, I'm like, oh yeah, can I have some more hours? Like, more hours. Like, and then in 5 years' time, like, if I've managed to get a PhD done, like, you're going to give me a job yet, or?
No, I like.
You've got to ask, haven't you?
Yeah, you do. It's refreshingly honest, and honestly, Chris, thank you so much for your time and insight on frankly a broad range of topics, and thank you to everyone listening. You can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms: YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Just search for Sidekick Community or Sidekick Stories, and we'll pop up. And please do give us a rating if you like the show, and do check out, as we've talked about, our free Sidekick app for iPhone and iPad, a collection of interactive exercises, tools, and tips to help you boost your mental well-being. The app enables you to build a personalized well-being toolkit to help you deal with life's ups and downs. And some of the exercises we talked about, coping strategies, thought reframing, are on the app. It's free. Sleep. We got some sleep advice on there.
Stuff on the app. I love the meditation type stuff. Like, I didn't even get on to talking about that for sleep, but that's, controlling anxiety through meditation is probably one of the biggest things you can do.
Yeah. So you heard it there from Chris first. Please download the app. It's free. We're a charity. There's no catches. And just go to our website, www.sidekick.org.uk, to click the download now button in the header, take you to the App Store. Chris, thank you so much again.
Absolute pleasure.